In continuing this particular discussion, we have Nick Agule, who is on Zoom this morning. He would expand a little bit about the economic impact of some of these issues relatively with what happened in the White House between Donald Trump and Zelensky. Good to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to our viewers globally.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. All this started when the U.S., after appointing a few persons for some discussions between Ukraine and Russia, they went to Saudi Arabia, and most people, especially Europeans, said that there cannot be any form of discussions without the involvement of Ukraine. I mean, this is supposed to be some sort of negotiations. And so we started hearing back and forth about the fact that the U.S. president was throwing also some tantrums at Zelensky, who is the president of Ukraine. And then we saw that build up until the Oval Office spat. How have you received this information and some of these reactions that you have seen so far? And do you think that Europe as a continent would stand up irrespective of if the United States at the end of the day refuses to support Ukraine?
Thank you very much for that question. There are two sides to this issue for me. So the one side is the US side and the other side is the Ukraine side. And the two actors, the two protagonists in this whole imbroglio is President Trump and President Zelensky. On the side of President Trump, he has not shown any love for Zelensky. Of course, there are issues dated back to Trump's first term. In the run-up to the election, which Trump lost as a sitting president to Joe Biden, Trump was looking for every arsenal to be able to throw at Joe Biden. And there was this allegation that Trump's son went to Ukraine and was doing business in Ukraine. And Donald Trump he put a call straight to Zelensky and said, commission an investigation into this, and in a bid to make Biden to look bad before the electorate. And Zelensky was not going to have any of that. So Trump lost the election, and now he's come back again in his second term, and Zelensky needs him now. Zelensky needs him because at the time that Trump needed Zelensky, the war with Russia had not started. The war with Russia started 3 years ago under Biden's administration. So now it is Zelensky that needs Trump. And Trump, being who he is, hasn't shown, he hasn't hidden his hatred for Zelensky. Like you rightly said, in the run-up to the botched meeting in the Oval Office, Trump was throwing all sorts of tantrums on Zelensky. He called him a dictator. A few days before, imagine someone that you are expecting to come to a meeting, you already branded the person as a dictator, and then Trump was planning to hold Ukraine's talk without Ukraine around the table, which, if not only Ukraine, but his European counterparts, like you have rightly said. And then all that on and on, he got on the day of the meeting. Even that a president comes out to welcome another president, the very first comment that this president makes is about the dress code of this visiting president. So right at that moment, Zelensky, even though was being welcomed, didn't feel welcome. He was already under pressure. And they now got into the Oval Office, of course. Basically, this type of diplomatic meetings happen in 3 stages. So as Trump took Zelensky into the White House, there will be a brief meeting where they will welcome, set protocol and all of that. And then they will come before the press where they will just say some formalities and all of that before they now go into the inner room for the real meeting. And then after the real meeting, they now come out to address the press. And in this case, the venue was set for that address. Two podiums were set up with Ukraine and US flags set up. And then a table was also set up where they were expected to sign the minerals agreement. So all that happened. And of course, Trump and his vice president, in my entire life, watching this event. This event happen very frequently, whether it's a Nigerian president hosting another leader, or his leaders around the world hosting other leaders, including our own president. We see these things all the time, and it's always the two leaders who make statements before the cameras, before the meeting, then retires into the inner room. It is the first time in my life that I saw in this particular stage of a former a president meeting another president, that the vice president, interjected into the discussion. I don't know if anybody has ever seen anything like that. For me, I watch these things always, but I've never seen. I know that vice president and ministers and all other government, high-ranking government officials, we make statements, or we intervene or interject in meetings behind the closed doors, the ones off the camera. But this particular meeting, which is made for the camera, for the press, where the two presidents just meet and say niceties to each other and then talk about what they are going to discuss, I have never seen anybody in any country where someone else, apart from the hosting president, makes a statement. But in this case, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance interjected, and then the meeting now got out of hand. So that is on the one side. That's one view. The other view is the Zelensky view. So for me, Zelensky lost situational awareness. In fact, I'm writing an article. I published that short article today, and I titled the article as Trump Zelensky's botched meeting lessons in diplomacy when negotiating with. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm frozen on the screen. Yeah. So the article is to give us, all of us, lessons, not just Zelensky, all of us lessons in what to do and what not to do when you are meeting with someone with a fat ego, especially if you are on the receiving side, right? So Zelensky lost situational awareness. He didn't understand the people he was dealing with. That these people have fat egos. There's a way you treat you deal with people with fat ego. And in fact, in my article, I actually said Zelensky, his first mistake was not first stopping in London to take crucial lessons from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who met Donald Trump the previous day. If you look at what Keir Starmer did, before anything was said, Keir Starmer, in the fashion of a schoolboy who is bringing out a letter to give his father or benefactor for school fees, or an applicant is dropping an application letter before a potential employer, he brought this letter out from the breast pocket of his suit, and he hands the letter to Donald Trump and saying, King Charles is inviting you to a state visit. And then as Donald Trump is opening the letter like this, Keir Starmer is saying, this is unprecedented. It has never happened in history for someone to receive this kind of
massaging his ego.
Massaging his ego. Massaging his ego. Trump is feeling, I am the only man in the world that the king will ever give this kind of this thing. Look, at that point, if Keir Starmer had asked Trump, sign away US to me, he would have done it. You know? So this is the lesson that Zelensky, he didn't learn it. You know, so at the end, after Keir Starmer massaged Trump's ego, and Trump was feeling very, very cool. You know, was it a trade deal? It's like a piece of cake. Everything went positively well, right? Compared to Zelensky The first mistake Zelensky made was that the White House had written to him that, look, even though we know that you are in wartime, you are wearing this your T-shirt, please try and wear a suit to respect the office of the President of the United States. When you are dealing with a person with high ego, right? They want you, they don't want stubbornness because naturally they are stubborn, right? So because they are stubborn, they don't like to deal with people who are stubborn. So Zelensky should have responded to that. Even if he didn't want to wear a normal suit like Trump wore, he could have worn a military suit, just to show that he responded to this request that was made by the White House. He didn't do anything. He appeared in his normal T-shirt. To Trump, that was an intransigence on it. And you can imagine that was the very first thing Trump said about his dress code. That is number one mistake. They now go into the Oval Office. I watched this press event. I watched it live here in my house. This thing went on for like half an hour. It was Trump and Zelensky. Trump was actually, showing some respect, doing like that but in fact, the meeting was about to end. Trump was like, so what's the last thing? Can we go? That was when J.D. Vance put up his hand. Trump said, go. Now, J.D. Vance said, what is going to happen now is diplomacy. They are going to prioritize diplomacy. Diplomacy is what is going to end this war. Zelensky had only 3 options at that point. Number one, just ignore J.D. Vance, focus on Trump, don't bother about him, whatever he said. He didn't do that. His second option was just nod your head and let things continue. He didn't do that. Number 3, he could have massaged their ego if I thought he wanted to say something by saying, so you see, we tried this diplomacy in the past and it never worked. But I believe now that with Trump on board, supported by Vice President Vance, that the diplomacy will be back on the table and we can move forward. If he said that, there will be no problem. There will be absolutely no problem. So that was mistake number 2. Mistake number 3, people with fat egos, they need respect. They want to be respected at all times. They like respect as Satan, right? Who is Zelensky? Instead of saying Vice President Vance, now say JD. He say JD. You can say that behind the door, behind closed door, but not before the camera, not before the American people. That's mistake number 3. Mistake number 4, people with fat ego, they don't want to be challenged. They never want to be challenged. And Zelensky, after schooling J.D. Vance, that's another thing. They don't like to be schooled. They don't like to be schooled. So he schooled him about the whole history of the war and everything. People with fat ego don't like that. Then number 5, they don't like to be challenged. After he schooled J.D. Vance, he now challenged him. Okay, J.D., what would you do? If it were you, what would you do? People with fat egos, you are entering dangerous territory. Before American media, you are challenging him. And then mistake number 6, when J.D. now started firing back, right? That is when Zelensky, if he has situational awareness, would have stopped talking, right? Would have just stopped at that point, so that Trump could have now finished the meeting. Then when they went behind closed door, they could have hit it up there as they liked. Okay?
Nick.
But Zelensky didn't keep quiet. He now continued. What next did Zelensky say? Zelensky now said, oh, you people, since this war started, we have been doing it alone. That's the one that brought Trump in.
Nick,
Immediately he said we have been doing it.
The meeting was riddled with endless mistakes, especially from Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukrainian president. But for want of time, can we quickly run through the economic implications of that particular spat, of that tension between Trump and Zelensky, especially as it concerns energy and defense sectors? What are going to be the likely implications?
So the Bush meeting has very big implications globally, not just economic, but also political. Like Trump said, we could be dealing with a World War III here. Because what does this mean? It means that if these talks break down as they have, and they have not been repaired, and America is not on board, then it is now left for Europe to support Ukraine. And I think Russia now is weakened militarily because for 3 years they have suffered so much losses. But Russia has got partners in the likes of China, North Korea, and all of that who can step in. And who knows what's going to happen? So that's the risk that is facing, the world in terms of where this conflict can go to. When we talk about on the economic side, of course, Ukraine is also an important economic partner to a lot of nations. Ukraine exports a lot of food, and Nigeria still buys wheat from Ukraine. There is oil on the side of Russia. With the embargoes on the oil on the side of Russia is why you see oil prices remaining this high in their 70s and 80s. And then the whole geopolitical tension is not good for business. It's never good for business. So at the end of the day, you will discover that even European nations, if they have to support Ukraine to prosecute the war, they will have to cut their budgets from other essential services to be able to fund their defense budget. And UK just did it. UK just cut international aid budget, and put the money in defense. So you can begin to see the impact that is going to have, not just on the European nations, but globally. And to what extent, like Zelensky said, one of his mistakes was to threaten his host, to say that even if the thing doesn't get to them now, it's going to get to them later. That's another thing that Trump didn't like at all. You don't threaten people with fat egos. Who knows whether the U.S. will be involved in the war, if there is a war at some point in time, and that will effectively mean we have a third world war, like Trump have predicted. So there are a lot of repercussions that are going to happen. So for me, to avoid all this, I'm going to put that in my concluding part of my article, to say, between President Zelensky issuing an apology, even as Zelensky wasn't wrong, but between him issuing an apology and groveling to Trump, or risking his country being overrun with war by Russia and the allies, which is the better option? And I think from where I'm sitting, the better option is issue this apology and save your people from further carnage and dissemination. So I think he should do that. Sometimes if you are the weaker person in a bargain, because like in this bargain between Ukraine and the US, Ukraine is a weaker partner. The US doesn't need Ukraine. In fact, the minerals deal that was signed is Trump's fat ego playing up, because Trump didn't want to spend a couple more or do anything for Ukraine without telling American people that they are getting something in return, right? Because Trump says America first. So that is why they signed that mineral. They were to sign that mineral deal. But the mineral deal is also good for Ukraine, because if American companies come in at the border with Russia and they are doing business there, Russia will be very careful to attack that place. Because if they attack that place, then it means they have attacked American interest. And if they attack American interest, America will respond. And if America responds, then NATO has to respond. because NATO's treaty is that if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. So for me, Zelensky should just issue this apology. He should be humble enough and relegate his own personal ego and pain he suffered in the hands of these two men, and issue an apology, a heartfelt apology, so that he can get back onto talking terms with the U.S. And then let's see if this much needed peace is brought into that region.
Because even the meeting that Keir Starmer actually had with some European, some other leaders as well. They said after the so-called resolution, they will take the same resolution to the U.S. for security guarantees for Ukraine. And one would wonder, really, can't Europe just support Ukraine throughout this war without the help of the United States? What is the implication if the United States is stepped aside or is stepped down from this war? I mean, this is Russia versus the entire Europe. I'm not sure that if the entire Europe decides to stand by Ukraine, that Russia will be able to stand, the firepower of the entire Europe, coming together against it. So what is this thing about the U.S. involvement? Why must the U.S. be involved? And now that we are seeing that Donald Trump's ego is really over bloating, what if Europe decides, you know what, scratch USA and let's do this our own way? What do you think would happen?
I think if push comes to shove, Europe will have no choice than to go this alone. But for now, they will try, and it is actually good for them to try to see if they can bring the US back on board. So, except they now discover that regardless of their efforts, no matter what they try or they do, that the US is not ready to come on board, that they can then now say, okay, fine, let's go this alone. So I think at the stage where they are now, they still believe that the relationship can be repaired, that things can go back to the drawing board and they can move forward. So that is what they are exploring, and it's good for them to explore that. But let us now take the worst case scenario, where to say US has refused, despite every entreaty, to come back on board. Europe will have to go this. I agree with what you say, that if the combined firepower of the European nations, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Spain, face the Russians, I think if it's the Russians alone, they could probably overrun Russia. Because let's not forget that for 3 years, Russia has suffered a lot of losses. Their military has been decimated. Morale amongst their citizens is low. There are soldiers that are actually running away, and there are people who don't want to be conscripted into the armed forces. That's happening in Russia now. So a combined force of European militaries against Russia could probably overrun Russia. But Russia is not alone. Russia has got allies. Russia has got China. China, as we speak today, is almost coming at par. That is, if they are not already at par, or they have not already surpassed the US, because when you come to military, all the data is never public, right? But China has developed military prowess that can match US. So if such prowess comes against the European nations, I don't think they're going to stand a chance. And then you have the likes of North Korea, who are there as well. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a difficult thing. More lives will be lost, more properties will be destroyed, global economies will be shaking. Imagine the whole of Europe going to war. It's going to disrupt a lot of global economies, because a lot of global economies depend on on Europe for one thing or the other. So, like you said, Russia could probably not withstand combined European firepower, but Russia is not alone. So it's going to be difficult. But the other thing is that you remember that when Russia invaded Ukraine, In the minds of a lot of people, including even myself, I thought that Russia was going to have it easy. That they were just going to overrun Ukraine and just annex Ukraine. But for 3 years, it's not happened. So when it comes to war and military engagement, you can never even say what is going to happen.
Insights on this very important and interesting discourse as we watch the unfolding scenarios playing out in America and Europe. Many thanks again.
Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.